Welcome to Midweek Mysteries, and thank you for being here. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. We appreciate all of you for listening, and of course, a big thank you goes out to our supporters on Patreon and on buymeacoffee.com. If you're new to the show, Midweek Mysteries is a shorter version of our full-length Sunday episodes, so be sure to come back and check those out as well. We also enjoy giving a shout-out to our newest supporters at the beginning of our full-length episodes, so if you're a new supporter, be sure to tune in on Sunday. Out of the 4 stories in tonight's episode, the first 2 are a little darker than usual, and they involve a demonic entity and family violence, which may be uncomfortable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Today's first Midweek Mystery comes to us from Destiny. Destiny's story is called Sleep Paralysis Demon and Mirrors. Destiny says, "Hey Nick, I wanted to share my experience with you about sleep paralysis and 2 mirrors. Let me start out by saying my family on my mother's side has a history of paranormal experiences, and we, especially me, are very sensitive. I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 months, and binge listened to all of the shows. During one of the episodes, you mentioned 2 mirrors facing each other, creating a portal, and this made a light bulb go off in my head. In 2018, I suffered from sleep paralysis for 7 weeks, and during that time I did not have any outside stress that would cause stressful sleep or anything that would rationally explain what I was experiencing, at least not to me. I have an old mirror that stands about 6 feet tall and about 4 feet wide. I have had this mirror for 14 years, and my uncle had it since he was 16 before he gave it to me, and he is now in his 40s. It has seen numerous location changes while he had it, and I am curious if something got attached to the mirror during one of his moves. Anyways, I moved this mirror to the left side of my bed behind my desk against a wall, and directly across the room was my dresser that also had a mirror attached to it. It too was old and had been my mother's. Looking back now, I realize that once I moved these mirrors across from each other, the activity in our home increased. Things moved and disappeared frequently, but I never gave it much thought, since I was used to it. The first couple of nights I would wake up seemingly without reason, and would struggle going back to sleep, but would eventually succeed. By the 3rd night, the demon appeared. It started as a normal sleep paralysis experience, the heavy weight on my chest, and the inability to make any vocal sound other than in my own head. I was unable to open my eyes at first, like something was holding them shut, but there was nothing physically touching me. When I was finally able to open my eyes, I saw a large, fanged face with leathery skin and leathery thin wings, like the wings of a bat, sitting on my chest. I thought I was looking directly at it, but I was actually looking through the mirror at this demon. This thing had my left wrist in its hands, with long, thin fingers and needle-like nails wrapped around my hand. This creature spoke to me, and it was unintelligible, but it sounded guttural and gravelly, as if it wasn't used to speaking. Every night for 7 weeks, this demon would slice thousands of cuts into my arms, hands, and legs, while it watched my blood pool to the ground below me. It never drank or touched my blood, just watched it drop to the ground. I told my husband I wanted him to watch me at night and wake me up if I ever seemed like I was having a nightmare, but he never did, because he said I never showed signs. I contacted Wiccans, a Baptist pastor, and tried to find any information on what this thing was and how I could make it leave, but never found much help. On the 6th night of the 7th week, the thing spoke clearly for me to hear, and it told me it was going to drain me one more time tomorrow night, and was going to be there to take my soul when the last drop of my life hit the ground. The next morning, I decided to rearrange my room to try and calm myself down, and incidentally moved the large mirror to another room because it was covering a wall that I wanted to put pictures on. I was terrified to go back to sleep that night, but I eventually fell asleep. The demon did not visit me, and still to this day, I have not had a visit from it since. It never occurred to me that that mirror was a potential portal until I heard your podcast where you talked about it, and it suddenly made sense to me. Thank you for giving us a platform to share these stories on, and genuinely wanting to hear them. I look forward to hearing more stories on the next Midweek Mystery. I contacted Destiny, and I asked her if she actually had scratches on her body after waking up, or if it was more of a vision that she was seeing in the mirror. She had this to say: I woke up 3 times with fresh scratches on my arm, but I never could come to terms of whether it was the demon itself or me scratching myself at night trying to wake up. I covered the scars up with a tattoo because looking at them caused extreme duress. The only thing that stood out for those weeks were bruises on my chest that I had no explanation for. Our next Midweek Mystery comes to us from Kasey. Kasey's story is called Demon Eyes. Kasey says, Hi Nick, I've been listening to your podcast recently at work, and I'm a personal favorite of the personal stories. I've had numerous experiences over my 20 years of life. When I was a little kid, about 5, my mother had a prophetic dream that my father would try to kill myself and my mother, and then turn the gun on himself. Well, a few nights later, my parents had been arguing until my mother went to work, and then it picked back up when she came home. I spent most of my time in my room. My father went to the bar, and I had gone to bed before he returned home. My parents' arguing woke me up, and I had this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was going to be sick. I had such terrible anticipatory anxiety. I heard a loud bang, and then I called my mom into my bedroom and told her something bad was going to happen and that I was scared. My mom tried to reassure me that everything was fine. I told her I had to use the bathroom, and she walked with me. I stepped over my father as he was lying on the ground on his stomach, not moving. When my mom and I came out of the bathroom, my father had disappeared into his bedroom, and he called for me. I went into the bedroom with my mom tailing behind me. My father had a gun on the bed next to him, and he kept telling me to get closer to him, but I refused, and I kept shaking my head. My mom grabbed me, and we ran from the house. Why did I tell you that story? Because when I heard the bang, my father and mother were wrestling with a gun, and my father's eyes had turned black. His eyes are normally icy blue. The gun went off and hit the wall behind my mom. My father's eyes were dark when we were in the bedroom together. He also has no recollection of most of the events from this night. That house in particular has caused physical harm to me by slamming a basement trap door on my legs and nearly crushing them, as well as throwing objects at me. The house also appears in all of my nightmares. The house calls to me. I believe that a malevolent demon resonates in the basement, and it possessed my father, and it's mad that it didn't get to take my family. I have more stories, but that's for another time. Thanks, Kasey. Tonight's next Midweek Mystery comes to us from Hazel. Hazel's story is called Victorian Lady at the Window. Hazel says, I've been listening to your podcast for the last couple of weeks after discovering it. I wanted to share one of my experiences. When I was around 4 years old, I lived in a terrace house in northern England with my parents and 2 dogs. From as early as I can remember, which was age 4, I remember being terrified at night. Our 2 dogs would not cross the threshold to my room either. If you picked them up and put them in my room, they would yelp and panic and try to scratch their way out the door. Every night, a tall lady appeared in my window in my bedroom. She had a Victorian-style dress on, with the high-buttoned collar, and her hair was in a high bun. She was bluish-white and transparent. She always made her way from the window to my bed, which was around a foot away from the opposite wall to the window. I used to hide under my blanket when I went to bed, because I knew she was there, even if I didn't look at her. Some nights I managed to get to sleep, and some nights I would jump down from my bed, on the opposite side from her. There was a foot gap between my bed and the wall, and I used to crawl across the floor as fast as I could, towards the door, and then go to my parents' room. The hallway light was always on, so my room was always reasonably well lit, even without my own room light on. This happened over and over again for a year or so, from when I can remember, possibly earlier. Every time I'd go and wake my mom up, and she would come and walk me back to bed, by which time the Victorian lady had gone. My parents chalked it down to night terrors. That was until one night when it played out the same as it always did, and I jumped down from my bed, crawled out the door, giving myself carpet burn on my knees, and waking my mom, except this time, when my mom came into the bedroom, the lady was still standing there in the middle of the room. My mother is Wiccan, and she was cross with the lady for scaring me every night. She smudged my room, put salt on the windowsill, and asked the lady to cross over. After my mom did that, the lady never came back. The room felt light and happy, and the dogs would happily come into my room at any time. Speaking to my mom about this years later, we think that the lady probably had lived there as the house was of the Victorian era, and she may not have known that she was dead and wondered why I was in her room. I have more stories of encounters and ghosts that I've seen and experienced that I can send you if you'd like. Hazel. Tonight's last midweek mystery comes to us from Joe. Joe's story is called Last Goodbye. Joe says, I'm an avid listener, and that has given me enough courage to talk about this experience. First of all, I would like to think that I am not a believer of anything paranormal, but this experience made me doubt whether the world is as simple as we see it. I am a native of Peru, South America, and migrated to the United States back in the mid-'80s. In 1982, I lived in a little town, more like a village, right on the northern coast of Peru. The town was called Lobitos. My dad was in the military, so we were living in a military base with a few houses for officers' families. A beautiful beach town where life was just a matter of going to school, figuring out when to go to the beach, and how to spend the daylight hours with friends and family, enjoying life, and looking forward to a happy time. At night, things were incredibly quiet, and you could hear the sound of the waves hitting the shore over and over. I learned what meditation was all about because of that soft, repeating sound. One night, though, that sound was different. Something did not feel right, and all I could perceive was this heavy atmosphere around the house. I went to bed thinking about how heavy it felt. Around 11:30 p.m., I started having these weird dreams. I kept hearing in my dreams that the telephone was ringing. I would wake up and walk to where the phone was and pick it up. Interestingly enough, I would not hear the ringtone, but rather just a static tone, as if someone was listening on the other side. Again, that heavy atmosphere would take over once I was awake. I would go back to bed and try to fall asleep, and as soon as my mind would start drifting, I would hear the phone ring again. Once again, I would wake up, walk to the phone, and pick it up. On the second time, my dad noticed me walking around, so he asked what I was doing. I explained to him what was going on, and he said, "Just disconnect the line." Great idea, I thought. After the line was disconnected, I would start drifting again, and again I would hear the phone ring, all in my dreams. This time, I was starting to get a little alarmed, because I had disconnected the line, and I knew there was no way for the phone to ring, so I spent the night drifting and hearing the phone ring. I slept very little that night. When 5 a.m. would come around, my dad would wake up to start his day, and the first thing he did was to reconnect the phone line. Lo and behold, the phone rang once again, this time for real. Needless to say, I simply jumped out of bed and ran to the phone to answer it, but Dad was already there and talking. All I heard was, "No, it can't be. Can you please repeat?" I knew then there was bad news, and I needed to know. Dad kept on asking more questions that I could not relate to, because I didn't know what the issue was. Once he hung up the phone, I had to ask, "Dad, is it related to my dreams?" And Dad, with this confused look on his face, told me that one of the officers in the base, his immediate superior and commander, had died over the night, and they found him in the bathroom, trying to get to the hallway to reach the phone. The phone was on the floor and emitting static because it was off the hook for so long. They estimated the time of his death at around 11:30 p.m. I believe he came down to say goodbye to my dad, because they were good friends and remarkably close professionally. I believe he was trying to tell him something, but, as you can tell by the story, I was not the best medium to pass information along. I sure hope that he is resting in peace and has found eternal life and happiness wherever he is. Thank you for reading this story and letting me get something off my chest that I've kept quiet and told very few people over the years. As we come to the end of this edition of Midweek Mysteries, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast. and a special thank you to Destiny, Hazel, Kasey, and Joe for writing in and sharing their experiences with all of us. Until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Sunday for our next full-length episode. If you or someone that you know has witnessed something unexplainable, and you'd like to have your story shared on the podcast, please contact me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or visit paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. Please remember, no matter how insignificant or outlandish you believe your experience may seem, I'd like to hear about it. You can also connect with us by joining our forum and by following us on social media. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. If you'd like to become a patron, you can visit patreon.com/paranormal mysteries. Benefits include ad-free episodes and early access to select shows. Or if you'd like to make a simple one-time donation, you can visit buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. However you choose to support the show, just know that we appreciate it. New episodes of the Paranormal Mysteries podcast are produced every Sunday, with the new Midweek Mysteries airing every Wednesday, and they're available on all of your favorite podcast apps. From all of us at the Paranormal Mysteries podcast, thank you so much for listening, and remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.